Okay, I am live on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. I know I kind of jumped this on you guys. Usually we're together at 8:30, but don't worry, we're going to leave this one recorded on Instagram. We'll leave it on Facebook for 24 hours, and then you know what happens. It's deleted, and Renee edits and adds all these things, cuts whatever needs to be cut, and then it's thrown on our YouTube channel where there it stays forever. And so if you're joining us, welcome to our room. Welcome to the sofa. I want you to feel very much a part of the abundant marriage family, because that's what you are. And so I should have done this one a long time ago, because it keeps coming up with my couples, and it's the fight about household chores. You know, there's about top 10 fights in marriages, and finances are one of those things, raising kids are another ones, in-laws are one of those things, and as you can imagine, household chores really is a top 3 fight that happens in most marriages. And especially when things start to change, when kids come along, or you're moving, or picking up on careers, or long hours, household chores is something that messes all of us up. And today, right now, I want to give you a short-term solution and a long-term solution so that you can stop fighting about household chores. Now, as you can imagine, when you come home, you're tired, husband works, wife works, kids, maybe they were in school, or honestly, maybe even mom stays home. But what happens when you come home is that you find a sink filled with dishes, or maybe you find that when your husband went to shower, instead of putting the dirty clothes, Renee, into the dirty hamper, he likes to leave it right there on the floor, right in front of the shower. And my thinking is like, you couldn't have just taken 2 more steps and put it in the dirty hamper? Or maybe your household is the one where there's toothpaste all over the bathroom mirrors, and you just can't stand it. You think, what in the world? Were they brushing their teeth, or were they brushing the mirrors? And this is a conflict that comes up, or the bed not being made, the dirty dishes, not putting away the dishes, or how about the clothes? The clothes that after is washed, it stays there week after week after week because no one is putting it away. What's the one in your house? If you're joining us, wherever it is, what is the household chore that you get most upset about, that you most fight about? What is it? Now, in most cases, all right, man, I'm going to call you guys out a little bit. In most cases, it is the husband who gets, the husband who is the slacker when it comes to the household chores. Now, is it always the case? Absolutely not. I have a husband and wife, a marriage that currently the husband is the one who's being a stickler about household chores, and the wife is kind of laid back. So this is not always the case, but generally speaking, the wife is the one who gets very upset when household chores are not being done. And so what happens is the wife will come and she'll remark on the mess that is the household. She'll say, this bed is a mess again, or yet again you don't put your clothes in the dirty hamper, or are you kidding me? You honestly couldn't have just rinsed your cereal bowl and put it in the dishwasher? You didn't even have to wash it. You didn't even have to scrub it. All you had to do is rinse it and put it right there. If you don't do it, who do you think is going to do it, right? Do you have those conversations and you come home, usually it's late at night? Well, what happens is when the wife starts to remark, observe, point out all the things in the house that is a complete mess, the response at times it's, listen, I'll get to it when I get to it. Cue in all of the reasons why the husband couldn't do it, or honestly the wife couldn't do what was the chore. And the reason it's that way is because when we feel like we're attacked, we're going to start to defend ourselves. But what happens most of the time when the husband says, I'll get to it when I get to it, immediately the wife registers this. That is key word for it's not going to get done. And so, although she's angry and upset, she gives a huge sigh, maybe an eye roll, and then she goes and she does it herself. Am I right? Absolutely. The wife gets upset. She asks him, it doesn't get done exactly in the moment in which she wanted it to get done. And so because she's so tired, she's so sick and tired, she says, you know what, I'm just going to do it myself. But here's the thing. When couples do not agree upon what needs to be done in the house and who's going to do what. And when spouses are not following through with their end of the bargain, bunch of aspects of the marriage will get ruined. It will be impacted, because here's the thing. Usually, one of the partners walks away feeling disrespected. The other one walks away feeling unsupported. One walks away feeling unloved. The other one walks away feeling, are you kidding? I feel like I'm on my own in this one. And then that trust that we talk about, that intimacy, that I have your back moment, it simply is not existing. And now, even if your wife does for you that which was your chore, in that moment, you better believe that resentment is getting restored. Resentment is getting stored, and ultimately, you will have a less satisfying marriage because of it. So who is it in your house? Husband, wife, both of you? Who's the one who usually gets upset when household chores are not completed? Now, as I told you before, often the men are named, are labeled the slackers of the house. And in my conversation with husbands, it's not that they're intentionally trying to be rude. It's not that they're intentionally trying to piss their wives off or to make them really angry or make them upset or make it seem like they don't have their support. It's not that. They just have a hard time understanding why the household chore is so incredibly important, why it's such a big deal, why it can't just be done at a later time, why they have to argue about something that is so inconvenient to argue about first. And the second thing that the men have a hard time wrapping their mind around is this. They will say that it is unfair that if wife is working, husband is working, both come home tired, they believe that the chore should be divided. Most of the husbands, I'll say 95% of the husbands that I talk to, where husband is working and wife is working, say, hey, yeah, I believe that, we should both participate in household chores. But here's the thing. A lot of these husbands were raised in households and families where the mother, even though she worked outside the house, she was the one who took the majority of the role with the household chores. And as you know, old ways die hard. So they grew up in a home where their entire lives they see mom working and they see mom cleaning and cooking and doing laundry and superhero status, right? And oftentimes dad did not. But now in 2020, we see things change. We see men taking a more active role, not only in child rearing, but also in house management. And it's a great thing. It's a great thing. But here's the thing. As these chores become imbalanced, when wife feels like she's doing so much more than the husband, or vice versa, I want to give you sort of 3 reasons why this can happen. 3 reasons why there's this sort of imbalance of household chores. Why one person seems to be doing more than the other person. Number 1, expectations. I know when Renee and I got married, I don't typically like to cook. Okay, I had to learn how to cook. I had to figure it out because we had to eat. But I got upset at the expectation that just because somehow I was female, that I was the one who had to cook. And honestly, Renee actually really likes cooking. I hate cooking. I much rather wash the dishes, and he actually rather cook than wash the dishes. I rather wash the dishes than cook. And so some of these expectations, and here's why. It's not an expectation because Renee believes women's job is in the kitchen. It has nothing to do with that. But when Renee was growing up in his household, his mother, a fantastic cook, an amazing cook, poor guy, he went from that to me, right? She was incredible. Handmade gnocchi and, all these complex meals, just so that you get an idea. Our wedding, we had about 300 people, and his mom, made all the food for those 300 people. And I kid you not, we were still eating wedding food for Renee for like the next month. We went to Hawaii for 10 days or something. We came back and there was still leftover wedding food. And so the woman can cook, okay? By all means, the woman can cook. And so obviously the expectation, not because he's a bad guy, not because he thinks my job is in the kitchen, nothing like that. Renee is in no way, shape, or form has that mentality. But the expectation was, well, my mom did it. You are my wife, and eventually will be a mom. So I guess it's the chore that you have. And so we had to sort of go back and forth a little bit with what was the expectation, define those expectations, and figure out who was going to do what in the household. And now here's the thing. Remember, Renee had an expectation because of the household he grew up with. And then my assumption was, oh, wow, I can't believe Renee believes that my job is in the kitchen simply. And so now I had an assumption based on his expectations, of which my assumptions were false. The assumptions were false. And so he did not see it as the woman's work. He saw it as, this is what I've been used to growing up. The same thing, which came to, maybe you guys have heard me say it before, one of the expectations, so to speak, was that Renee would absolutely put the toilet seat down after he used the bathroom. Because I grew up with a brother who put the toilet seat down because he grew up with a sister, but Renee did not grow up with a brother. And so I had an expectation that he was supposed to put down the toilet seat, and he would never do it because he grew up with a brother. And now the assumption then was, wow, Renee only cares about himself. He only thinks about himself. He doesn't care that I'm going to come here in the middle of the night and I'm going to very much fall in this toilet bowl. And so do you understand where we get in trouble when it comes to household chores, when we have all of these expectations and all of these assumptions based on these expectations? So number one, be careful with your expectations. Speak openly about your expectations. Define it. Help your spouse understand your difference in upbringing. And then number two, don't make assumptions. Don't quickly try to reach conclusions. And ultimately, I think what we need to go back to is what Romans 12:1 says. Romans 12:1 says that you and I, we need to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. And so whatever is the expectation, whatever is the assumption, the Word of God tells us that God wants to renew our mind to His expectations of us. And so it doesn't matter what the setup was in your household. Now as a new family, you can create new rules that work for you. And maybe it worked for your mom and for your dad, but maybe now these things need to be adjusted. So careful with the expectations, careful with the assumptions. Take it to God, as Romans 12:1 says, and say, Lord, help me renew my mind that I would be changed to your assumptions, to what is right, to what is truth. Help me, Lord, navigate in my marriage what you expect me to do as a husband, what you expect my wife to do as a wife, and may we come together to build our new family. Now, the third reason we get in trouble is, to me, one of the most common reasons, which is lack of communication. Lack of communication. And again, the expectation and the assumptions, it all revolves around lack of communication. Because here's the thing. When you got married and it was just your husband and you guys split up the chores. And maybe it worked very well for a certain period of time. But then what starts to happen is people start getting careers. Or maybe Renee and I, we got married and Renee was just about graduating from college. And I was going into college, I don't remember. And so Renee was working and he had a job and I was only at school. And so in the beginning, while we were both not working, there were assumptions and expectations on me that since Renee was, how was it? I think Renee was going to school and working, and I was only going to school, right? Renee was going to school and working, and I was only going to school, meaning that I had way more time. And of course, since I had more time, I was doing a lot of the chores in the house. But here's the thing. Once Renee stopped going to school and was now only working, Renee very much started to help me. And so do you see where communication needs to be ever so present in the conversation about chores? Because what might have worked for a few months and even a few years might no longer work. And guess what? As soon then as we had children, River and Reed, twin boys, once again, those chores, they needed to be sort of reinvented, rediscussed. We need to see who was going to do what. And this is why communication is something incredibly important, of course, in all of our conversation. New careers, more kids, a change in schedule, all can cause a shift. A shift, and if it is not discussed, it will create a problem in your marriage. So look, one of the big takeaways when it comes to communicating is that you just need to constantly be checking in. You, husband, need to check in with your wife and say, hey, are you feeling overwhelmed? Are you feeling overworked? And vice versa. Wives, check in with your husbands and ask the same question. See, hey, I realized that before I used to do the dishes and clean up the bathroom, but now that you started a second job, or now that you went back to school, or now that we have 2 little kids, is there some way that I can help you more? Is there some way that I can help you more? Because listen, even if your wife is staying at home, even if she's not working, don't think for a second that staying at home is not a full-time job. Taking care of the house, taking care of the kids, teaching them homework, it's a full-time job. And so I had a couple recently, and the husband was extremely frustrated because he works all day, and he says, Amanda, I'm doing my job, I'm providing for my family, I work all day, my wife stays home. We've decided that it was important for her to stay home with the kids, especially in, right now with the pandemic we're living, we didn't want to send them back to school, and so we decided to keep them learning online. So wife stays home. And husband would come home and he was very upset. He was very upset because there were certain aspects of the house that he thought, the house is messy, food wasn't made, and if it was made, it was made very late at night, and he was getting continuously frustrated because his mind was, you're home all day, what in the world are you doing? And she was so his expectation was, I'm going to work all day, you're staying home. The expectation is that the house would be sparkling clean and that the food would be waiting for me on the table. Right? And he's a nice guy, okay? He's not a mean guy. This was the expectation that he had. Well, her assumption was then, wow, he cares very little about asking me about how my day is going, and he expects to come home and all these things to be done without realizing that staying home and helping the kids in school is a full-time job. He doesn't realize that I literally clean up and the kids make a mess. I clean up and the kids make a mess. I spent all day feeding these children. And yeah, I'm exhausted. I'm worn out. I'm tired. I no longer have my free time because when the kids would go to school, when I would drop them off, I'd be able to work out. I'd be able to do groceries. I'd be able to do all these things. It's like my job has increased. And so as we're having these conversations, the expectations and the assumptions, they started to die down because now the wife could see what the husband was seeing and the husband could see what the wife was seeing. So it's incredibly important that conversations are being had, and even more so that you check in with each other. Hey, honey, how can I help you? And they settled that in order to take something off of her plate was that he was going to start doing groceries. So instead of him coming home right away from work, that he would stop in the grocery store, pick up the foods, pick up the things that she would need, and do that. They also decided that, once or twice a week that they were going to do takeout until they were able to adjust to this new schedule, because it was very difficult for her. She loves to work. She absolutely loves to work. And the husband hadn't realized that not only did she have to sort of press pause on something that she really loved to do, which was her career, but she was already feeling not enough. She was already feeling like she was letting the family down. And so here's a woman juggling this new normal of hers while not being able to go to her job and having her free time, not having her self-care. And together they came up with solutions, with a plan that now fit this new normal that all of us are living in. So I want to make tonight's live very simple, very to the point. So grab your papers, grab your pens, because now we are going to find short-term and long-term solutions to the problem of household chores. The fighting of household chores, it needs to stop. Oh man, how long are we going to fight about the same thing over and over and over and over again? So look, let's recap real quick. Fights about household chores. Husbands, usually, you guys are the ones that are getting called out. You guys are typically the slackers. Is it always the case? Absolutely not. But generally speaking, the wife is usually getting upset that the husband is not doing his part. Now, because of that, expectations are involved, assumptions are involved, and very little lack of communication is involved. Be aware that something that worked 2 years ago might not necessarily fit your new reality here and the now. So you need to make sure you're having open, honest conversations often. Check in weekly with one another. And so what is the short-term solution? So imagine that an argument about household chore arises, okay? If you've been with us long enough, you know that I always say you need to find the root. Do not stay merely at the symptoms. You need to be willing to dig and dig and dig, because things might seem like something on the outside, but something entirely different is going on in the heart. And so the household chores, when it arises, immediately, as I had a wife say, I asked her a question. I said, when your husband does not wash the dishes, how does it make you feel? And she goes, it makes me feel disrespected, unsupported, and invalidated. And the husband says, are you kidding me? All of those? What do you mean not supported? I support you. What do you mean disrespected? I don't do it on purpose to say, ooh, look, I'm going to disrespect her. She's going to have to wash my dishes. And invalidated in what way? And she goes, invalidated because, like, I already cooked. The house is clean. I did everything. And I leave everything perfect so that when I go to sleep the next morning, I can start my day, at zero again. I can start it fresh. When I go to sleep and you sleep after me and I wake up to dirty dishes, when I went to sleep and the sink was clean, I feel completely invalidated. I feel like it does not matter that I worked so hard and that you're just going to come and you're going to sort of, ruin my hard work. And he had no idea. So here's the thing. As soon as a household argument begins, oftentimes, the heart is beating. The pulse is beating. And usually it is not advisable to try to figure out a solution in that moment in time. You might even, because of the anger and because of the words exchanged, compel your husband, compel your wife to do the chore in that immediate moment. As I had a wife recently, she was so upset, and her husband's, okay, I'll wash the stupid dishes already if it means that you're going to give me peace of mind. And so he went there and he washed the dishes. Now, obviously, he washed the dishes very angry, and as you can imagine, this is not going to be a long-term solution. Things need to be resolved. Things need to be solved. And so the best thing to do is to table the conversation when you can talk about it reasonably and rationally. So table the conversation, but it is also incredibly important, husbands or wives, whoever is the culprit who did not do their chore, that you validate your spouse's anger, that you would validate it, that you would acknowledge their frustration, that you would acknowledge their complaint and saying, you know what, truly. And I think there was one husband that did it beautifully. He has a really hard time remembering to wash the dishes. He was working from home and his wife was working out, not in home, outside of home. And she would leave his meals ready and she would leave the house all clean before she left. And when she would come home, as you can imagine, there was dishes piled up in the sink. And she would get so incredibly upset. And you're going to see the long-term solution of what they did with that. But she would be so incredibly upset. And when she would confront him, she let it go a few days. And wives don't do this. But typically wives, they kind of hold their anger inside. They won't tell you right away what's going on. And so husbands will say, hey, honey, is everything okay? Everything is fine, right? And we know that everything is not fine. And so what happens is women, we start getting this resentment, this anger sort of piling up. And she says, and her mindset was, let's just see how long he's going to notice. And so she did what most wives do, is come home, notice that it was dirty. She visibly is upset, but again, remember, men are clueless, and not clueless, I don't mean it in disrespect, but literally at times they don't have a clue, they don't know. And remember, if you heard our conversation about why men at times notice that their wife is upset, but don't approach because they're scared half to death. They don't know what to do. They're used to solving problems, and if they approach a situation that they feel like they can't solve, it overwhelms them. And so anyways, husband obviously was not noticing until it got to the point where she just exploded one day. She said, I'm so sick and tired. I work all day. I leave everything ready. I leave the house clean. I come back. The least you can do is you know how the conversation goes. You know how the argument goes. And so in that moment, the husband, he was just like, you're right. I'm so sorry. I'm really trying to do my best. I forget. and I'm sorry because I know it's important to you, and even though, I don't get it, I'm going to do a better job. He took responsibility. He didn't defend himself. He didn't give any excuses. And the wife was, she had ammo. She was ready to just fire. And when he took responsibility, it was almost like she was like, like he gets it. She felt validated, okay? And this is the key to understanding why it is that your husband or your wife is so upset. And so then you're going to want to take it one step further. We need to start recognizing where the criticism is coming from. Because here's the thing. Someone will complain and complain and complain. But after they feel like their complaint is not being heard or validated, then they'll start to attack character. And we're not justifying, okay, the criticism, because really we don't want to criticize anyone, because then they're going to start to defend themselves. We want to offer a complaint saying, hey, I feel very frustrated when fill in the blank. What we don't want to say is, you're so lazy, you're so lazy, you only care about yourself, you're incredibly selfish. We don't want to attack anyone's character. We want to complain. But oftentimes when someone is already so frustrated, they will start to criticize. And so if your spouse starts to criticize you because you did not complete the chore that you said you were going to do, try your very best to see and find the root of the criticism. Dr. John Gottman says that behind every criticism is an unmet need. And in the case of this wife, it was an unmet need of her feeling that she was being invalidated, that she had no support. And the husband saw that when he offered his support to her, not only in the house cleaning ways, but in other ways, that the fights about household chores lessened, lessened. And so the overall idea here is that if you start having an argument about chores and you are in the wrong, take responsibility. Let the other person feel validated. Say, you know what? You are right. Recognize their complaint. Because if you don't recognize their complaint, soon that complaint is going to turn into criticism. And even when they criticize, don't defend yourself. Instead, try to find what is the unmet need. Start to ask questions. Why did your wife explode in the way that she did? Why did your husband explode in the way that he did? Try to figure out what is behind these symptoms. What is the root problem? And then try to meet those needs. And often it is the case that when you don't allow yourself to feel like you need to defend yourself, that you will allow your guard to come down, and now you can ask really good questions. Ask really good questions. You can hear the unmet need and ask questions to understand what those unmet needs are, and then together you can come up with a solution. And finally, so that's short-term plan, okay? Short-term plan, you're having a fight. Make sure your spouse feels validated in their complaint. Take full responsibility. Don't try to defend yourself, and pin the conversation. Don't have the conversation when everyone is upset, when everyone's angry. It's going to go nowhere. Pin the conversation with, hey, you're right. I'm going to try to do better, and we're going to talk about this some more. And choose a specific day, a specific time where you are going to talk about this. Now, the other aspect of the household chores, we're going to look at long-term solutions. That was a short-term solution, so what is the long-term solutions? And the long-term solutions, you can think sort of a collaboration with all wives. We did a wives-only Zoom meeting for Abundant Marriage, and there was a younger wife there, and she says, I'm so tired. And she's particularly, she's particularly, she has a very perfectionist mentality. She likes things very organized and neat, and disorganization. And when the house is a mess, it drives her insane. She even says, I'm the type that vacuums every single day. I wash my clothes every other day, and the bed is always made, and there's never dishes in the sink. She's all in. She's gung-ho. And her husband, a sweet guy, incredible guy, but, he doesn't do it to be mean, but he's just not as consistent with household chores as she is. It doesn't affect him as much as it affects her. And he's already said, this is one of the things that I fell in love with her because I loved how organized she is. I love how neat she is, but I don't particularly like to do household chores. And so it's funny how some of the things that make us sort of fall in love with each other are also one of the things that make us fight with each other. So anyway, she came in and she goes, I'm starting to lose hope that he'll ever change because I keep having the same argument over and over and over again. He always forgets to put the dishes away and it drives me insane. I go nuts. And she goes, I've already tried not saying anything and seeing if he would notice, and he wouldn't notice. And that makes me even more angry and more upset. And we just fight at least every other week about this. And so all the wives came together and they were trying to give solutions. And so we came up with this long-term solution. We came up with this list. And so again, if you have paper, pens, write it down. I'm just looking at my feet. Reverend Reed used markers and painted all over my feet. Okay, so you ready? The first one is this. Find the unmet need. Remember, behind every criticism is an unmet need. And so the husband very quickly realized that his wife felt unappreciated, she felt disrespected, and she felt unsupported when he did not do this. And so he thought, what's the big deal? It's just a bowl of cereal. Get over yourself. I'm going to put it in the dishwasher. But he quickly realized, no. There's something so much more behind this. And when she told him what it was, because he asked good questions and was willing to hear and did not get defensive, he was able to find it. He realized that the dishes were a piece of a larger puzzle of unmet needs. And until those needs were met, the arguments, they continued to surface until he, in different ways, he did his best to make her feel validated and to make her feel supported and to make her feel appreciated. That way, if he forgot to wash the dishes, which I can assure you that he might forget again, she didn't feel so empty in her undervalued, unappreciated love tank that they weren't able to solve the problem. Number 2, wives, it's so incredibly important that we do not do it for them. Again, and I'm using wives here because, again, generally speaking, usually men, you guys are the slackers when it comes to household chores. But if this isn't the case in your marriage, invert the names. Put wife instead of husband and husband instead of wife. So oftentimes, as was the case of this wife, she would come home, dirty dishes, husband would be all happy. Hey, honey, how was your work? Great. She would walk in the kitchen and boom, right? Her face would change. She'd get upset. Her mood would change. And he'd be like, is everything all right? And she'd say, everything is fine. And then she'd go on and wash the dishes. And again, because he really didn't have a clue, he thought everything was not a problem. He didn't realize that she was so angry and upset about the dishes. And he would forget and she would do it for him until, again, she allowed resentment to grow, and then she would explode. Don't do that. Don't do it for them. If your husband says, are you upset? You need to be real. You need to be honest. Don't beat around the bush. Don't think that he's a genie in the bottle, that he's not the reader of hearts. He's not the Holy Spirit. You need to be clear with your husband. Yes, something is wrong. And what is wrong is that I asked you to clean the dishes and you didn't. And then your husband, oh my goodness, I completely forgot. So sorry, I'm going to do it right now. Usually that is exactly what happens. However, it's not going to happen if you allow your resentment to grow and then you say it as a criticism instead of a complaint. Then truly, now it's going to be a battle of biceps. He's going to say, well, if you talk to me like that, then I'm not going to do it. And here's the thing, wives. Often wives say, my husband acts like children. Well, because you're treating them like children. And so it becomes an unending cycle where the husband acts like a child, the wife treats him like a child. Because the wife treats him like a child, the husband acts like a child. Usually, when this whole do it for them, usually it's parents doing for the child who cannot do it for themselves. We cannot create this dynamic. Ladies, we cannot create this dynamic. So allow your husband to do it, but also be open, honest, to tell him what is going on. No games. No, nothing's going on. He should figure it out. He should know. He doesn't know. He's not going to figure it out. His brain is very different than your brain. Watch the difference in brain, the video that we did about the difference in women's brain and men's brain, and you are going to see their brains do not work like our brains do. They will most definitely not figure it out. And if they do, it's going to be too late because you're already going to be frustrated. Number 3, create a list. But this is the most important part of that list. Together, if you create a list, you write all things that need to be done and you hand it over to your husband, he's not going to like that very much. And honestly, wives wouldn't like that very much either. If someone just came over to you and be like, here, these are the list of all the things that you need to do. No one likes that. Together, sit down, grab a piece of paper, write down everything that needs to be done in the house. The bathrooms, the sink, the laundry, whatever. Write it all down. And then you are going to start dividing the household chores. And you're also going to see, ladies, that oftentimes it seems that your husband doesn't do anything, but when you put it on paper, you start to see that he actually does a pretty good bit. That was the case for Renee and I. I was feeling so frustrated and overwhelmed, and when we started to talk about it, it's like, oh man, he actually really does a whole lot. And so he makes a smoothie for the boys, and he's the one who cleans our cars out. And there are a lot of things that Renee was also doing outside the house, which is chores around the property, that I was overlooking. So make sure that you write every single chore down and then divide those chores. The other thing I would recommend is there are times that someone absolutely hates to do something. For example, I hate to take out the trash. The bathroom trash was just now at its brim. And Renee was, hey, tonight, and giving all these little signs for me. And I said, and again, I am not above this time of friendly coercion, okay? And I said, okay, I'll do a deal with you. You take out that garbage right now, and you might just get lucky later this evening. And he says, okay, I'm on it. And he says, is there any more garbage that I can take out? So make it light. And so here's the thing. If I did not tell Renee, because Renee could very much be going to the bathroom every single day, and the garbage there is piling up, and he might not notice it. Now, I'm not going to get mad because Renee didn't notice it. I'm just going to go and say, hey, the bathroom garbage is piling up. Could you please take it out? And his response was, absolutely, sure. What I don't want to do is wait to get angry and let each day go by as I'm staring at that garbage and thinking, I can't believe he doesn't notice. I'm sure he does notice, and then start creating assumptions. It's probably because he doesn't care. He doesn't care about me. He doesn't care about the family. He only cares about himself. Let's not do that. Let's not go down this rabbit hole. Just say what you want. And your husband, because he is very much Bob the Builder, he is a problem solver. He will want to solve your problem. The next one. So you've created the list, you've divided it, you've taken things that your spouse absolutely hates. It's kind of like one of those, you want to make sure your kids eat vegetables, but if he absolutely hates broccoli and like he gags every time he eats it, there are other vegetables besides broccoli, right? Give him the cauliflower instead. And so if your spouse absolutely hates to do a specific chore, you take it. The next thing is time frame. Wives, we can be the absolute worst about this. When a wife says, take out the trash, she literally means stop everything to do. Stop everything you're doing and do it right now. Women, we have to be flexible. So part of this list is you giving your husbands a time frame. So it can be like, hey, honey, every Thursday, the garbage needs to be taken out, for example. And then don't annoy him Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday about it. You can be annoying on Thursday about it. But give him the benefit of the doubt that he will do it in the time frame that you guys have figured it out together. But wives, what we cannot expect is that when we ask our husbands to do something, that they're going to literally drop everything they're doing and do it right in that exact moment. I was literally talking to a husband this afternoon, and he says, Amanda, it drives me crazy. My wife will say, hey, can you take out the trash? And I will respond, sure. And if literally 5 minutes goes by and I did not take out the trash, she will get up aggressively from the couch, she'll go into the kitchen, she'll grab the garbage, she'll slam the door, and she'll walk outside. And he's thinking like, I said I'm going to do it, but give me time to do it. Husbands, wives, your time frames are very different. Jesus' time is different than our time. And so be flexible when it comes to time. Figure out a schedule and then give your spouse the benefit of the doubt that he is going to do it in that time frame. Don't be pestering, don't be bothering, don't be annoying. Allow your spouse to do it in the time that you guys establish. Number 5, regular check-ins. I've mentioned it earlier in this live. Check in regularly because it might have worked for a week, a month, but then it might not work. And so if you need to adjust, you need to adjust. Remember, factors change, situations change, life changes, and we need to be flexible to change with life. And finally, number 6, it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen overnight. But here's the thing, man. If you forgot a chore that you were supposed to do, if you can at least speak about it before your wife speaks about it, it'll already be a huge thing. So for example, wife comes home, and as soon as she comes home, husband realizes, oh shoot, I got distracted and I forgot to do the dishes. Before she even goes to the kitchen and say, hey honey, I completely forgot. I was so overwhelmed with work, had a lot of stuff to do. I'm going to press pause right now and I'm going to go do the dishes. The other thing that could also be part of this conversation, and this is why you guys need to daily be checking in. There was a husband and he was super tied up with work. He had his chores. And so literally, I think it was like a week before it actually happened, he said, listen, babe, next week I have some very important deadlines to meet. And would it be possible for you to help me with my chores during that week? And what do you think the wife said? She says, of course. She just felt appreciated and validated and respected that he went out of his way to have a conversation and said, look, I would love to do it. I know I'm adding this. I know I'm just adding more to the list. But could you please help me out? And the wife said, absolutely, I can help you out. So be ahead of the game. Plan ahead. If you're slammed at work, if for whatever reason, if you're sick, of course your spouse can pick it up for you. Of course they can support you. But it's important that we're having a conversation where it's not feeling like my expectation and my assumption is that if I'm slammed at work, my wife should know or my husband should know that they need to pick up more around the house. No, let's have conversations about it. And in the end of the day, because things are not going to happen overnight, we need to leave room for mistakes as much as improvements. Leave room for mistakes as much as improvement. We want to make sure that we are being consistent and we are shooting for consistency. We are not shooting for perfection. Women and men are completely different. But the fight about household chores, remember, your short-term solution, to make the other person feel validated, take responsibility, don't get defensive, and then follow the long-term solution. Find the unmet need. Don't do it for them. Don't do it for them because you're going to create a cycle that you're going to be very unhappy with. Create a list together. Allow for a flexible time frame. Check on each other regularly. And remember, it's not going to happen overnight. Give each other the benefit of the doubt. All right, guys, that's what I have for you guys here tonight. If you apply this list and if it's helpful, please let me know. Send me a DM. I would like to know if it was helpful to you. I would like to know if this setup, this list, this long-term solution, if it was helpful. Because ultimately, what are we trying to do here? We're trying to solve the fighting about chores, household chores. And I think we don't need to be wasting our time with household chores. And so let's apply that short-term solution. Let's apply the long-term solution. Let's work together to create healthy, happy, abundant relationships. I'll see you guys next time.